Welcome to a Modern Nonprofit podcast, powered by the Charity CFO, your compass for creative solutions in running your nonprofit. I'm Tosha Anderson, your host and guide through this nonprofit maze. From fundraising to volunteer management, we've got your back. Join us each episode for fresh, game-changing strategies that can make a real impact. Hey, nonprofit friends, welcome back to another episode of a Modern Nonprofit podcast. I'm Tosha Anderson. I'm your host. Today, I bring along a new friend, as I do, Pat Taggart. Pat, you are the founder and chief creative with a firm called Sky Blue Creative, and you focus on kind of video storytelling. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can tell your mission story through the use of video media. So first, Pat, before we dive into the conversation, of course, thank you for coming on this episode and sharing some of your words of wisdom on how you've been successful in helping other nonprofits through their storytelling.
Tasha, I am so excited to be here. I love the work that you do. We do work for both for-profit and nonprofit companies, but I get a little bit more of a twinkle in my eye when I get a chance to work for nonprofits. I love to
Yeah.
help companies organizations that are doing just really great work in the world. And so I'm so grateful for this platform and thank you.
Yeah, I certainly obviously have a soft spot for nonprofit organizations. And Pat, I was just mentioning to you that I go to a lot of fundraising events. I go to a lot of galas, especially in my 15 plus years that I've been working essentially exclusively with nonprofit organizations. And I like to joke that I'm a CPA with a secret passion in marketing. And also because I'm the accountant for so many nonprofits, I have a vested interest in the success of fundraising initiatives. So when I go to these events, I try to pay attention to what's working and what's not working, what's resonating or winning the hearts over the some of the words that you use, kind of winning hearts and donations, hopefully with video storytelling. I pay
Mhm.
attention to these little details, whether it's print material or video material, and what's really standing out, what's unique, what's different, how is this organization telling its story in an impactful way compared to other organizations that I see, because I come across a lot of marketing content. So
Mhm.
I'm really excited to talk about this. I think so many organizations understand the value of video storytelling, but how do you really amplify and kind of differentiate yourself from other people that are essentially doing the same thing? So let's dig into that a little bit more, this concept of like winning hearts and obviously hopefully donations as well. You talk about this in your work and on your content online, but what does that mean to you or to the clients that you've worked for? And obviously, in your words, why is that important?
Yeah, I think that you have a really wonderful opportunity when you're doing great work in the world to make people feel your impact. And there's a very
Mm-hmm.
big distinction between telling people about your impact and making them feel it. And the
Mm-hmm.
best education I got, I was actually working for a for-profit company, a big
Mm-hmm.
public company, and they had this really wonderful program. And it was called the Employee Hardship Program. And
Mm-hmm.
how it worked, Tasha, was that every pay period, you could donate maybe $1, right? There was thousands of
Mm-hmm.
employees. So you can give $1 to this fund. And if there's an employee that, for example, they have a house fire and they lose everything, they can apply for a
Mm-hmm.
hardship grant. And so you're helping the team, right? You're helping
Mm-hmm.
people that may work across the country or across the world that you may never meet, but they're all part of this
Mm-hmm.
family. Well, it was
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful program, but they got no traction. They got no adoption.
Mm-hmm.
So we're thinking, okay, what can we do? And I said, hey, we've helped some people, right? Like I know this hasn't caught fire. Gosh, I shouldn't say caught fire. I know this hasn't really caught
Mm-hmm.
on huge, but
Right.
we've helped some people. And they said, yeah. And I said, well, can we get them in front of the camera to just talk about it? And they
Mm-hmm.
said, oh, I don't know. That feels like it's exploitative. And I said, well,
Mm.
it's not if you ask, right? Like they could say
Right.
no. And we asked these people, these two people, we said, hey, we know you received the hardship grant. Would you be willing to talk about it? They said,
Mm-hmm.
would we be willing to talk? This was a lifeline for us. We would
Mm-hmm.
love to talk. And so
Mm-hmm.
all it was getting these people in front of the camera for 15 minutes apiece, Tasha, and telling their story.
Mm-hmm.
And literally overnight, 400% increase in
Wow.
biweekly donations through payroll to
Yeah.
this fund. And why? Program didn't change, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
because people could feel it, not just know about it. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can get there with the great work that you're doing, man, like music for video tells you how to
Yeah.
feel subliminally, like it's my best friend, right? And so if you have a good story and you're able to mix in a little bit of great music, you can do things that not the greatest copywriter on the planet can do with perfect text.
Yeah, and I want to dig into that more a little bit later on because I've heard so, when I worked for nonprofit organizations and, I'm, pitching like we need to raise more dollars, we got to balance
Mhm.
this budget. And I want to unpack that a little bit more, like
Yeah.
I would say the natural tension maybe that comes from those that are charged with fundraising or advocacy or awareness of the program, and those that are actually frontline working with, in many cases, very vulnerable population. And we'll call those the
Mhm.
programmatic staff, right? And I've
Yeah.
certainly seen firsthand tension in so many organizations balancing not exploiting people's stories for the financial benefit of the organization, but balancing that with capturing the stories of people that want to share their own stories and sharing that with an audience that is really moved by that and wants to play some small part in the big difference of what they're trying to do and how to align that. So I guess
Mhm.
I'm kind of maybe skipping ahead on the conversation, but how have you seen organizations, navigate that?
Yeah, how do you
What would
balance
you
it?
say to somebody listening? I know there's someone listening like, no, Tasha, you shouldn't do this. Or somebody else listening like, yes, tell me how to have that conversation internally.
Yeah, I think that the wrong way to do it is to send people out with cameras and don't tell the people that have benefited from the program that they're going to be there. And I've seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is
Mm,
certainly exploitative, right? Like,
right.
oh, hey, we're doing this thing today. Don't pay attention to the three people in the background with the cameras. Like that's absolutely
Mm-hmm.
the wrong way to do it. I think that if you
Right.
go to people and you say, "Listen, I know that this has been a positive for you. You've told us that, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to help more people like you.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share your stories so that we can do that? Because the only way that we can help more people is if we
Mm-hmm.
raise awareness for this, whatever this is that we're doing. And if they say
Right.
no, that's totally cool. But I know
Right.
that your audience, Tasha, and I listen to your podcast. I know that there's so many organizations out there that are helping so many people.
Right.
My guess is that you don't have just one or two people to ask.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
if they're a no, then they're a no. I also think that you have to do that. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. There is, and I'm so biased. There's a right way and a wrong way. The
Mm-hmm.
right way for me, and more or less the only way that our team creates video is unscripted. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that when you tell somebody that has been the recipient of good,
Mm-hmm.
here's what I want you to say, and here's how I want you to say it, that is
Right.
also exploited. You should never tell people how they feel. They know how they
Right.
feel, right?
Right.
So just ask them. And if you do
Mm-hmm.
that, there's not a darn thing in the world wrong with that. That is not
Yeah.
exploitative. It's an opportunity to help more people.
Yeah, and I've definitely been in I've participated in video production where it's a series of open-ended questions, to your point. I
Mhm.
mean, at least to have a common theme where you can pull it all together from a production, but the best content comes from, like you said, that stuff that's unscripted that you just
Yeah.
simply probably couldn't write if you had sat down to try to write. Some organizations, haven't, made this plunge into video production, and many people that are listening, yeah, Tasha, it's a lot of money, or, whatever investment, or we don't know how to get started or whatever. Give another like shameless pitch on why this is obviously such a smart move, or ways in which people can repurpose this material, or why every organization should have video content, because I would argue they should. I'm not even a nonprofit, and I believe in the benefit of video content that you can share. From your experience, like, what are smart ways that organizations have used this content that may not be perhaps so obvious?
Here's the shameless plug for video in general. If you're listening to this right now, say you walked out on the streets of your city or town right now, and you got 10 people to give you 2 minutes of their time. And then you gave them a choice. You can either read this for 2 minutes, whatever this is, or
Hmm.
you can watch this for 2 minutes. How many of you would bet the balance of your bank account for a chance to double up that at least half or more than half of those people are going to say, I prefer to read.
Mhm.
I've asked that question to live audiences so many times, and I've never had a single person raise their hand.
Mm,
Everyone collectively says, if I'm given the choice to read or to watch, I'm going to click play.
right.
So now I want you to think about how you engage your audience today.
Mm,
Is it mostly text? And if it is, the question is, well, what makes those people any different than you? If you and
mm,
everyone else you ask this question to prefers to read over watch, but you're thinking, well, I can't do that for my organization because
right.
organizations on our websites, for example, it's all text. And if I make a video, it has to go on our
Mm,
about us page. You can never write text good enough. You
right.
can't. A really well told story that's genuine and unscripted is always going to carry more weight and be more powerful and be more authentic and tell the real true story about your impact. So if you ask yourself that simple question and you don't pass the screener that you'd rather
Mhm.
read than watch, then nobody else
Mhm.
does either.
I would say that's probably even more true in the world of, YouTube and TikTok that we operate in, right?
Hmm.
I think people are really normalizing video content over text content. I think maybe there was a point if somebody wanted a quick answer, they just want to be able to read it. Maybe their brain processes it faster. They can kind of skim through it. But in the world of online messages and more and more and more video content created, and having more and more options of ways to frankly even create video content pretty easily, I would definitely
Hmm.
think that that percentage is probably even higher of those that want to take in some video content.
For sure. And it's a story. So that's the thing, right? Like, hey, I'm going to tell you about this organization that's doing great. Do you want to read about them for 2 minutes, or do we have a video about them? We can show you. I
Hmm.
mean, I forget what the number was recently, but there's such a huge percentage of our brain that's dedicated to visuals. And I make
Hmm.
videos for a living, so you certainly don't need me breaking down anything medical. I'm not nearly that smart, but it's a
Yeah.
huge number, right?
Yeah.
And you're taking that totally out of the equation if there's no
Yeah.
visuals to look at. So it just
Yeah.
stimulates our minds in a completely different way.
So we talked about things being unscripted. And I think we can all agree that things that are obviously scripted are just cringy. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty noticeable. Kind of what is the strategy, or what should people take into consideration when pulling content together, whether it's employees or, because typically these videos would have an element of perhaps programmatic, staff that are working with these individuals. Maybe it's you know, donors that believe in the mission and are calling for more action from other potential donors. Maybe it's those that have been impacted by the program. So kind of walk us through kind of your general approach for kind of pulling all that information together and how to make it at least seemingly less cringy.
Yeah, so you hit on something really important, Tasha, which is that we have consumed and continue to consume so much video content on social media, and
Mm-hmm.
almost all of that's unscripted. And so that's what we're used to seeing, and it's
Mm,
not perfect by any means. And
right.
so the first thing is throw out the idea that you have to be perfect. And if you stumble here and there, or if you throw an in there, that oh my gosh, that's that's
Mm,
that's wasted. That's how people talk. You're
yeah.
sitting across from your friend, and just sharing a pizza. That's how we talk. And
Right.
so, number one is forget about perfection. Perfection often isn't genuine. And what we're looking for, really, at the end of the day, is genuine content. If you are doing this in house, I'd say you probably do need the help of at least an editor
Right.
to be able to piece this. The beauty there is that I always tell our clients, like, where else in the world can you be great 10% of the time? And that's a raging success. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
were good 10% of the time in your job, you wouldn't have a job. And
Mm-hmm.
but like I'll interview people often for 15 minutes and a minute or two or three. That's all that'll ever see the light of day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to realize that we have this incredible opportunity to just let it fly and
Yeah.
be authentic and be ourselves and trust someone that's creative. But on the professional side, like when I go out and help organizations tell story, my whole job is just making people comfortable enough to tell the
Mm-hmm.
story that already exists. That's the biggest secret. The story is already there. It doesn't have to be created. So you just have to unlock it, and it lives in the people that continue to create that story every day. So you have the
Mm-hmm.
storytellers, you have the story. You just have to unlock it in a way that isn't, as you said, cringy, which is
Right.
which is scripted and stiff.
Yeah. So on the other end of the spectrum from cringy, I don't know if I've been able to put my thumb on it, but those videos that are really powerful. And I always pay attention, again, when I'm in these fundraising spaces and like how many people are crying, how many
Hmm.
people seem very moved by that. What similarities, if there is, a list or somewhere of, characteristics that videos, would have that are seemingly the most successful? We've talked about, be genuine, like be, unscripted. But are there other things that, you look for, when you've created a video and you could look at it and say, nailed it, like this is going to be great. What do you
Yeah.
look for? Or what have you seen be most successful? What elements are really most successful for the best videos you've done?
It always starts, and there's two sides of it. There's the content, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
the tech. There's the tech side. And I
Mm,
won't bore
okay.
you too much with this with the tech side. It is important. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can take somebody out immediately if sound's not good. Like people always
Mm,
forgive less than perfect quality video, always.
mm,
But you need really good sound. And so
gotcha.
that's like a huge focus for us. I also think that, there's something really beautiful about being able to isolate your subject. And so if you look at me now, my background, hopefully if I did this correctly, is fairly out of
Mm-hmm.
focus.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's small things like that. Music is so powerful. It's so
Mm,
powerful. And then really great B-roll. And so B-roll is all those
mm,
things that you show to help bring the story to life. So there's really
mm-hmm.
two key elements to the work that people like us do, which is there's the interview or the conversation, and then you want to lay visuals over that really bring it to life. And so being able to work those in there, if there's an opportunity to put slow motion, there's magic to it. There's been magic to
Mm-hmm.
it since slow motion film was
Mm-hmm.
created,
Yeah.
right? And so slow motion and the perfect piece of music,
Mm,
but none of it works without a great story. And
right.
so you can't BS that. You can't just bring kind of a mediocre story and hope that you're going to give it to someone that's really talented that's going to create a brilliant piece out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If the story exists and it's really good and you're really doing impactful work,
Mm-hmm.
at that point you have the real possibility to make a room full of people cry if you put that
Mm-hmm.
trust in that story in the right person's hands, and you get the people that are experiencing that story or creating that story relaxed enough to be vulnerable. And
Mm,
vulnerability is really the key to all of it, because staring into the lens of a camera or trying to remember what to say, it strips all the emotion out of everything. So right now I'm staring into the lens of a camera. Most of the work
mm,
that we do, we will talk to people and have them look just off, just like this,
right.
and just have a human conversation and try to get them to forget about the cameras. And just that subtle
Sure.
shift, 6 inches with their eyes can make all the difference in the world.
You talked about, a powerful story or good story. I'm curious if you have any more insight on that. And here's what I'll say. Sometimes I hear stories from organizations when I know the work that they do, and maybe it's the Scorpio in me, the drama queen that I am. I like big, moody, like stories, go big or go home kind of personality I am. And so when I hear stories, it's like that's way more subtle than I know the impact that we're having. And so should these videos, go all in with these powerful stories or try to pull that out as much as possible? You mentioned vulnerability. I find that those that are a bit almost, I'll use the word shocking for lack of a better word, but really drive home like the severity of, what these people are dealing with, or the power of the programs. And so, for example, I'll give an example. I work with, I'm on a board of an organization that focuses on suicide prevention for school age children. And sometimes some of the messaging seems a little too, it's not as alarming as perhaps I think it should be given the crisis this really is. This is serious. This, not that nothing is serious, but you know what I mean? Like this is, knock you out of your chair kind of the statistics and how alarming this is. And when we believe that to be true about the work that we're doing, and you could fill in the blank for anything. You could talk about domestic violence shelters, you could talk about the homelessness problem, you could talk about, hunger and food scarcity. I mean, you fill in the blank, right? And for every leader of the organizations believe, I'm sure, with the passion that I'm kind of describing. And sometimes I feel like in video, it's not quite captured the sense of urgency. It's like, oh, we did this kind of like nice thing. And it's like, but are we really driving home the urgency of the problem we're really trying to solve, with the assumption that this video is being shared to people that perhaps are being asked to contribute financially to the cause, right? And
Mhm.
so should we kind of think about a good story or our messaging, maybe it's okay to be bold about it. I
I
don't know.
think it's a no, I think you're dead on. It's totally a missed opportunity
Mhm.
if you don't really understand who your audience is and what you want them to feel.
Yeah.
And on all, because when I talk about unscripted video, I don't mean unprepared. I go
Yeah.
into interviews crazy prepared. That's my
Mhm.
job. And so I'm never
Mm.
holding a list of questions, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that is like a barrier between you and the person you're talking to. A list of questions, that's a crutch. That's lazy, in my opinion. I think if you've done
Mhm.
your research, you know the outcome you want to create. You
Sure.
know the conversation you have to get there. And so
Mhm.
anytime we're on a discovery call, and I'm sure there's other people that do my job that do the same, I say, hey, what do you want your audience to feel?
Mm.
And a lot of times it kind of freezes the client for a moment. They're like, I
Mhm.
never really thought about it in that term. And so I like to kind of reverse engineer the process and say, okay, let's picture this video done. Lights go off,
Mm.
people watch it, or they're on their phone, or they're watching in bed on their laptop, and they see this and they get done.
Mhm.
What's the emotion we're trying to create? What do you want them
Right.
to feel?
Mhm.
And I think that you do push it as far as you can,
Mhm.
right? Like, I think you have to assume that it's the only piece of content they're ever going to consume of yours.
Mm.
And are you putting your best foot forward, right? Are you
Yeah.
shooting your shot? Because
Mhm.
it's such a noisy world we live in. Like,
Yes.
we just get inundated with content. So you have to find a way to freeze people.
Right.
You have to find a way to stop them in their tracks and touch their heart and make them say, okay, there's an urgency to this. This isn't something I'm
Yeah.
going to keep on the back burner. I need the help now.
You bring up a couple words that you were saying, stopping people in their tracks. What feeling or emotion do you want them to have after they watch this content? And then it got me thinking about, because a lot of times I see this video production in preparation for a big, gala or something like that, maybe a large campaign that they're launching, some large fundraising initiative, right? And I was
Mhm.
kind of thinking about these words that you were kind of describing, and I'm 100% in agreement with it. And I'm thinking about the audience. Presumably these are people that are no stranger to the philanthropic community. They probably attend a lot of these sort of events. And you had mentioned like cutting through the noise. And it's like, how does this differentiate? How does the message, how does the urgency, how does this problem feel different than all of these other really compelling programs and causes that I'm also asked to contribute to? And as I mentioned earlier in the call, I get invited to a lot of events. I get a lot of, paper correspondence, like through different invitations. Probably have a few sitting here on my desk, like, and I pay attention to how do these organizations speak about kind of the urgency for their problem. And it kind of brings back to the example of the board that I sit on. I remember sitting at an event and how I got, not just donating, but also serving as the board treasurer now. I was completely shocked and appalled by the statistics that they were sharing and thinking, this is a crisis. This is a real problem. And that's just the kind of drama I'm looking for when I go to these sort of events or when I watch this kind of video. Like, am I leaving this moment with a sense of, wow, this is a real problem. And thank goodness for the people that are working with this organization and trying to solve this in some small part. So
Yeah,
this is all
you
great. Yeah.
you don't want to leave that on the table. That
Mhm.
is that's the big lesson to take away from this
Yeah.
is what's your story? Who's your audience? What do you want them to feel? You may only have one
Hmm.
chance to get them.
Yeah,
Go get them.
exactly. Well, that kind of brings, I think, to the next part that I think a listener is going to be asking. All this sounds great. Yeah, this has been on my list, or you're right. I maybe need to think about refreshing my video content, or hey, that's on our list anyway. I want to ask you a question, and I think I probably know the answer, but how often should a nonprofit record a video piece? Like, what would you say?
It's a great question. I think every time you have something to say, that you're not
Mm-hmm.
just polluting the water, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
that you're not getting to the point, because there's all these different theories about social media. And I always like to tell people I'm not a marketer. I'm absolutely a filmmaker first and foremost and always. And so, whatever cadence you choose, especially if you're using social, I think that there's someone that's really as passionate about that as I am about
Mm-hmm.
this. But you want to make sure that when you speak, people want to listen. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that if you're just chucking stuff out there for the sake of chucking it out there, I don't think that's a great idea.
Sure.
But what I do think is if you haven't gotten started with this yet,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times people just want to go, Tasha, to the story of their organization. What's our
Mm.
organization's story? The best things come from within the organization. So it's not the story of
Mm-hmm.
your company organization, it's the stories that grow from those. A lot of times they're the stories that if you're out to dinner or if you're at a bar, you're like, and you just start telling stories, those are the stories you should be sharing. Because don't
Mm-hmm.
forget, people that consume your content, they're people. And
Right.
storytelling is like our universal language. It's the world's universal language. It's stories are told in every country and in different languages, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's like the one thing we all have in common that people love and are compelled by is story. And so think about those stories. And I'd also say for a lot of nonprofits, especially but not exclusively if you're early in your trajectory,
Mm.
give people a look into what you're doing. Like let people
Okay.
in. Talk about talk about what you're building, talk about your challenges, tell those stories. You can really almost like people say we're all media companies. You can
Mm-hmm.
turn, and I mean this in the best way possible, you can turn your nonprofit into like this really cool reality show where
Mm-hmm.
you're letting people into the day to day and you're explaining how it works.
Mm.
Because otherwise you're just another nonprofit. So by showing a bit of yourself and of your people and showing people, yes, there's people behind this every day that wake up for this very specific cause and we're doing all this good, I think you can win fans that way.
Mm. Interesting. You say this, I had to chuckle a little bit when you said, essentially pretend you're kind of a reality show. I think sometimes we think about video content by way of donors, but I think there's a different dimension to look at this. And most recently, potentially against my better judgment, many people on this platform may not know, but I let my team convince me to start a TikTok channel. I was like, oh my Lord. Like I'm
Me
all for
too.
having like conversations about the industry of nonprofits and how we help share good resources with clients, but that was actually intentionally designed not necessarily for the benefit of potential clients or current clients. It's for recruiting and
Hmm?
showing people inside what it looks like to be within this space and how we operate, and we're real people and just normal things that we do and kind of how goofy we are here when kind of the cameras are rolling or not rolling. And so there's different ways you can kind of think about using video content, whether it's very professionally done and edited and you're kind of packaging it up in a certain way, or it's more informally used. And I like your advice there, because I think the kind of the hidden message there is have kind of a purpose for it. And maybe there's different purposes for why you need content. That's
Yeah,
something that
and
I've started dabbling in more this year.
that's really cool. And we actually the the majority of the work that we've done over the last couple of years since COVID has been recruiting work. It's been
Mm-hmm.
telling the story, the culture story of organizations to
Mm-hmm.
attract the type of people that fit.
Yeah.
And while we're on that subject, the companies that do it the best, they
Mm-hmm.
don't spend a lot of time talking about what's great about the organization. They're
They
very,
show it.
very specific. Well, but they're very specific about who would not fit. And
Mm.
so we just did one where the first 45 seconds of the video is if you don't like to wake up early, you're not a fit. If you don't want to work holidays, you're not a fit. Like they
Oh.
had a very, very specific culture. And
Mm.
so I think you can do that in a video. And the people that are
Sure.
telling the story, it's not the CEO, it's not management, it's frontline. It's the
Mm.
people that are closest to the work that are
I
telling
like
that
that.
story. That works for profit and nonprofit. It's
Sure.
being very specific about your culture, who fits and who doesn't, so that you're not wasting time bringing people in that can pollute the water of your culture because that can be really toxic.
Absolutely. That's an interesting take. I love that. Yeah. No, it's funny. We've recently done a lot of work in the last year for, I think we do so much work. And again, this is for profit, nonprofit. One of the things I love about the role that I'm in is, I work with so many nonprofits and have done that for so long, but then I've also started and grown a rapidly growing for-profit business as well. And to see like the parallels or even the intersections in many ways, that there's a lot of things there's more common, um, there's just more in common with nonprofits and for-profits than I think there probably are differences, honestly, especially if you're kind of a startup, you're trying to figure things out. There's a lot of like similar, I guess, issues and things you need to consider, or which is really the whole point of this podcast. The things that I've learned on how to run and develop a modern business, I think could very easily be applied or is already being applied to the nonprofit world. And we're just sharing more and more and more of these tips on how to do things in an interesting way. So,
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow I'll be at a for-profit business. We're filming with for-profit, and Thursday's nonprofit, and our approach changes zero
right. That's
as far as
interesting.
capturing the story, because this it's still people that are doing
Mhm.
important work, and we're there to help them share their story.
And so I'm curious, you're filming the for-profit for what purpose? Recruiting, or is it more sales for
Yeah,
clients?
it's actually we're doing a little bit of both for them,
Okay.
marketing and recruiting, so internal, external. Because when when you set this up and you get people in the chair, it's a huge missed opportunity not to check all of your boxes, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like to come in and say, we're just going to create recruiting content. Well,
Right.
do you need help marketing your story externally? Like probably a really great time to grab that then as well
Mhm.
while we're there. And so a lot of
Yeah.
times we're doing a combo of both. Most of the time lately, the last 2 years, the initial need was recruiting. And so
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
that's the way we get in, and then we wind up just adding on some external content. But that's
Hmm.
normally how it works from a package standpoint.
Love
I
that. And
assume
then
there's a lot of
the
other people doing the same thing in the work that we do.
sure. Yeah. And then the nonprofit world, though, what would you say those videos are typically?
Yeah, so a little different there. A lot of times it is as you'd expect to share the
Hmm.
story to help attract great new donors, to help
Right.
people get behind the cause. But I also think that there's an opportunity there to talk about the culture, especially if there's a
Yes.
little bit of scale to it,
Hmm.
to attract people, because you need talent, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
you need
It's a
talent.
huge
It takes
problem.
talented
Huge
people.
problem. It's a huge problem in the
Hmm.
nonprofit space. Um, yeah, you bring up a good point. I could do a whole nother podcast on that. I saw an alarming statistic. The nonprofit industry has higher turnover than any other industry in the labor market. So it's a huge
Whoa.
problem. And especially certain subgroups of the nonprofit industry are especially vulnerable right now. There's no shortage of the demand of the work that we're doing. It's just a shortage of the talent to do it. And it's more and more competitive, not just necessarily across sectors, right? But, for example, if you're a mental health provider, you're competing with private practice, right?
Hmm.
Those sort of things. So it's a real problem. So switching back, for those that are listening, how would someone go about hiring a professional to do this? Like, yes, we talked about some casual content, maybe they can create it themselves. But let's say for some of these bigger pieces, maybe it's a recruiting and employer branding video, maybe it's for the first, gala video they're going to do. What are some of the things that people should be looking for to know that they get the right person? Because it is a big investment. And I think it's a lot of nervousness to pull the trigger on that. So if you were a nonprofit leader, what should they be looking for?
First thing is to make sure they're not trying to put a bunch of planning and scripting meetings on your calendar.
Mm,
So I'd be
mhm,
very specific about their process.
mhm,
And if they're trying to say, okay, we're going to storyboard this, and
mm,
if they're treating it like a feature film, like a
mm,
scripted
mhm,
film, they're
mhm.
going in the wrong direction. You're bringing
Right.
somebody in that is not intimately involved in your organization, and you're handing
Mhm,
them over the keys to craft a
mhm,
story. Story's there.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think first, I would be really specific about trying to find somebody that's philosophically aligned with the fact that the story's already there and it's a great story to tell. Their
Mm,
job
mhm.
is to just unearth that story, not create that story.
Gotcha.
Then there's some other things, there's people in our industry that want to own all the raw footage. and they
Mm,
want to limit you on like one round of changes. I know this is getting like
mhm.
a little bit in the weeds, but
No, it's
like
good.
what you really want is a partner. Like
Mhm,
I don't care if we're making one round of changes or 10 rounds of changes. At the end of it, I want you to look at the video and be like, this is us. This is our story.
mhm,
This is exactly who we are. This is the work that we do. I'd be proud for anybody to see this.
mhm,
And ultimately,
mhm,
this is going to move the needle. And so if there's a lot of that kind of like red tape,
mhm.
then and you're not getting a partner, you're getting someone that's trying to really pigeonhole you into, okay, this is the way we do it. We're going to do it our way. And if you want to make changes, we're going to make it incredibly difficult for you. That's not a
Mhm.
partner, right? That's a
Right,
vendor.
right, right. Okay, good.
And one more
And
thing, Tasha,
oh yes, please.
you should absolutely, absolutely 100% own your raw footage in perpetuity
Mm,
to do whatever you'd like. And so
good
people are
to.
like, people have a scarcity mindset in our industry sometimes where they're like,
Mhm.
well, if I give them the raw footage, they're going to give it to somebody else. They're going to hire somebody else to edit a bunch of other stuff. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
no, if you hit it out of the park for them and you treat them
Right.
really well, they're never going to want to work.
Well, and I've worked with video production companies that's like, yes, that raw footage is there. And if I want to go back and re-edit or use that footage for a different purpose, why go find someone else? Like if you did such a great job, like I'm going to go back to
Totally.
the person that shot it and originally edited the first round of things. And now we have an opportunity or more of a budget to go back and do some more work with that footage. You had mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
maybe you'll use 10% of the footage. Not that it's all bad, but you have to condense it all down. So there's so much that you can do with, short clips and things like that. So
There's so
Pat, this,
if we do
mhm,
interviews, Tasha, just one quick note. If we do like a round of interviews with people and we're going to create, a couple of key pieces, evergreen pieces that are going to live on the website to either help them
mhm,
attract great donors or to help them recruit,
yeah,
from all that other footage, you can knock out 20, 30, 40 pieces of social media content
right.
from all of that raw footage. You can fill your pipeline for an entire year.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
incredible.
that's why these unscripted conversations are so valuable.
I love that. Well, that's helpful to know. And, then that brings up a whole separate issue, which I'm living in now. It's the video cataloging. You create so much content, you don't even know what you have anymore. But that's a good problem, I think,
No.
to have. That's what the marketing people tell me, oh, that's normal. I thought, okay, I guess I'll accept that. But
Oh, it's a lot. It's a whole lot.
yeah,
And now we're going back because we realize how important subtitles are, engaging
right.
subtitles. And so you're taking all your old content and you're running it through an AI program to put subtitles on it.
And
And
editing
you,
them, edit
yes. And then you look
them.
at them, you're like, oh, wow, this is better. But man, this is a lot of work.
So what we were saying earlier, do people want to watch it or do they want to read it? They want to read it while they watch it. That's the answer. Okay, everyone, for
Boom.
social.
That's engaging the visuals. That's firing the mind in a way that you can't
Hmm.
with text, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Pat, I love this conversation. I'm, like I said, I'm always saying that I'm such a junkie for finding new ways to get our messaging out there, get the branding out there. Marketing is an area that, gosh, if the nonprofit world had the same kind of budgets or had the same liberty to be able to spend on getting their messaging out there in a way that so many other for-profit businesses with investors or whoever could, it would be such a different landscape. So I really appreciate people like you that are trying to take these messages and getting them out into the world. And for those leaders that are running these nonprofit organizations, if they want to follow more of your work or get in touch with you or learn more about your video storytelling, what is the best way to get in touch with you? Is it your
Yeah.
website, Sky Blue Creative?
Yeah, two best ways would be skybluecreative.com. That's the website. Sky Blue
Okay.
Creative spelled exactly the way you'd expect. And then I'm super active on LinkedIn, Tasha. So it's
Okay.
Pat Taggart, Taggart, contrary to how it was
Hmm.
spelled on all my little league trophies. Pat
Yeah.
Taggart on LinkedIn, and I love to engage with people on there. And ultimately, I'm all about trying to spread the word on this. I mean, there's only a couple of clients a month that we typically work with. We're like very, very hands-on, high touch. And
Hmm.
so, we're not a great fit for everyone, but the people that we are a great fit for, we really dig in and kind of become a partner with them while we're working with them. But
Okay.
for everybody else, I'm always happy for your audience because I love the work that you do. If there's anybody that just says, "Hey, I don't know if we're ready for this yet, but I'd love some advice on this, this, or this," I'm always happy to have
Yeah.
a conversation.
Okay. Well, There you all hear it. Pat, thank you again for joining us. And another shameless plug. I'm unapologetic about that today, I guess. If you found this content useful, just remember the rules of social media. Engage with it in some way, give it a thumbs up, share, like, engage with it, subscribe, depending on where you're at. This is the way that this content becomes more easily accessible or searchable for other nonprofit leaders like yourself. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye. That's all we have for you today. Once again, I'm Tosha Anderson with the Charity CFO, and this is A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to A Modern Nonprofit Podcast on all major streaming platforms so you will stay notified for when the latest episode drops, which will help you stay in the know about anything nonprofit related. Also, join our community on Facebook by searching for A Modern Nonprofit Podcast and follow us on all of our social media accounts. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.